so far today and this whole experience at StockCharts has been amazing because you are now added to the list of fabulous people that I've met as a result of this company that seems to be a magnet for the best and the brightest. So TJ, it was so great to meet you today.
Oh, thanks, Mish. Good meeting you today too.
And we did this charting forward segment where we got to talk a lot about what we saw in terms of projection for the future, but I know one of the things that you indicated was that you have a very set strategy in how you make those determinations, whether it's more in terms of sector or indices or specific stocks. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I have a Moxie Indicator that I created, and it's basically what helps me swing trade and identify what's going on with the market. And the short of it is that the Moxie Indicator, as it's coming from negative to positive, is negative energy, negative momentum to positive momentum. That's what we're looking for, since we're usually trying to trade long. It works short as well. And so once it then fires long, we then look for confirmation of price. Basically, it doesn't matter what momentum is doing if price isn't at least up and over moving averages. So we look for price to get over certain moving averages and then engage with those moving averages and look for everything to keep moving to the upside. And then as far as our exits or indications that this move is starting to end, we look for negative divergences. So one way I kind of explain it is, okay, so price keeps going higher, but the Moxie Indicator keeps going lower. It's trying to keep going up on less gas, less energy. And usually we see those negative divergences and then the indicator actually starts getting closer to zero. It means it's out of gas, out of upward momentum, and then usually see the end of the move for that period of time.
Well, what you just described not only is incredibly sophisticated, very effective, but very much mirrors what we do in Market Gauge. So how did you get to this point?
Well, it's really a lot of my dad. I remember when he was an investor, he was a longer-term trader and would manage his own money. And so I remember I was probably 3, 4, 5 years old, and he'd come home from work, and I'd sit on his lap, and we'd look at daily graphs, I think at the time, And he would just ask me, like, do you think this is an uptrend or a downtrend or sideways or what? And he would just try and ask my child brain, like, oh, what do you think of the pretty lions and what they did? And I just remember over the course of time, he said, look, no matter what you do in life, you're going to be making some money and you're going to have to invest that money. He said you should learn about the market because it's important to know how to do this. And so he started teaching me and take me around to places and go to stock seminars. And I was 12 years old at my first stock seminar. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it was important. So I kind of paid attention. And day trading, we followed a couple other traders or gurus or whatever. And I just kept staying on this path. And I did eventually find a group of traders that I really could resonate with. And they kind of took me underneath their wings, and I paid attention to them a lot, but there was still just some missing component. And so after a while, I kind of had to just go off and do my own thing and start just answering the question of, like, how does the stock market work? And then I started messing with indicators, and that's how I kind of came across the Moxie Indicator, and I built that thing up. And then I realized, like, I think I really have something here. And so one of the mentors that I had, he also saw what I was up to, and he was like, hey, I think you should do something with this. And so he allowed me to actually talk or teach or promote to his subscribers. And that's really where I got my start of being able to talk on the microphone and teach and whatnot. Then I started Moxie Trader. And then from there, I reached out to Simpler Trading. I met John Carter at another stock trading show. And he said, yeah, come on over. And 4.5 years later, something, that's where I'm at. So been a very fun journey.
You've had incredible role models. I do have a question about your dad. So how did he get his start? It sounds like he has some floor trading experience. Did he ever?
No. Just a private individual. Read a lot of books. My dad is a very smart individual. He Air Force and electrical engineer and patent attorney. And so he just would always read books. He'd always highlight them, and he just learned and taught himself how to read. He went to stock trading seminars too, and kind of the same stuff that people who come to us and listen to us on StockCharts. I'm sure my dad did that version of it back in the 80s and 90s.
That is fascinating. And then in terms of current gurus, you mentioned John Carter. Obviously, he's legendary. But it's great that you were able to take all this information and basically apply your own spin to it. And rare, by the way, because there are a lot of great traders and there are a lot of great educators, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're a great trader you can teach, and if you can teach that means you're a great trader. So being able to have that cross section of both is is fantastic. And as somebody who's been in this business for a long time, for me, it's incredibly joyous when I get to meet somebody like that. So.
Well, I tell you, and I tell my subscribers and anybody else, I say the number one thing that actually helped my trading was to teach. As soon as I started making videos and talking and annotating, I was hearing myself, I was speaking it, I was having to look back, I had myself recorded. All of this just kept the snowball growing and building to where it just helped me. And now what I do is I constantly talk about it, and it helps that feedback loop. And so I actually tell other traders who are trying to come up and learn on this, I say, make your own videos to your own self. I know it's a little weird, maybe a little silly, but go make your own videos and then go watch them. Go watch them right away, or go watch them a week later and see how you called it and see how the market changed, and just start giving yourself your own feedback loop.
That's great advice. Advice, though, a lot of people won't follow, because most people, not most people, well, I guess I can say most people. I mean, we're here, obviously, with the creme de la creme. But we know that over 90%, maybe even close as 98% of people who trade wind up losing money.
Yeah.
Certainly this was true where I came from.
It's a tough business.
It's a tough business. So it's a great idea, but unfortunately most people feel that this is a lot easier than what it is, and that the market owes them something, that it's the great American dream that you can basically, and it is, by the way.
Yeah. There can be a lot of success to it.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you, I'm a completely opposite of background. So my dad was relatively uneducated. He was a letter carrier in New York. We had no money, and my mom was a housewife. And all of a sudden, they wound up with this child who had a very strong will and desire to learn, and learned quickly. So they told me to be a teacher. Oh, you'll be a perfect teacher. And that is what I became, a school teacher in special education, because I was always interested in the different brain, or the atypical brain. And then all of a sudden I found myself in my very early 20s with no money. And I met this girl who worked for Merrill Lynch on the Commodities Exchange. She was working in coffee, sugar, cocoa as an order clerk. She said, hey, how would you like to come down, see the floor? And I went down there and I went crazy, because it was like,
yeah, must have been quite the experience.
Yeah, it was exactly what I felt like I needed. It fit everything into my personality. I was mathematical oriented. I was very physical because I was an athlete. And I didn't even think about the fact that I was going to be an only woman. That never really even entered into my brain so much. I was just more like, I need to learn this. And so everything that you have had and evolved to has been a much bigger process for me until I met my husband, who, it's like you had an uncle, who worked for, was a stock trader, very successful. And when he was 3 and 5 years old, he would put him into bed and read Shakespeare and show him charts.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a combination right there.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it's just so funny how we came from different places, but we've evolved to the same thing. As far as of all the things that you're doing, I mean, you mentioned momentum and price confirmation, and I can't tell you how important that is, because one of the things that we created is what we call the real motion indicator, and it's a momentum tracker, and it uses the 50 and on a longer term time frame, the 50 and the 200-day moving average.
Well, and a lot of institutions use those moving averages as well.
But that's just for tracking momentum, and then above that would be the price chart that also might have a 50 and a 200-day, if we're looking at day charts, moving average. So very often, and this sounds like this is why it's so interesting to me that you do this, is very often you might get an indicator that shows a divergence where the momentum is starting to pick up, but the price hasn't quite confirmed.
Yeah.
So we will often wait for the price to confirm. So if it's momentum's over a 50-day moving average, but price is still that far from the 50-day moving average, we'll wait for 2 closes over the 50-day moving average, and then we have our risk parameters set up, and off we go. I mean, we use other layers in that, but that's really very, very two primary ones.
Well, the thing you were saying about the 50 and the 200, if something's in a downtrend and you have the fast moving average below the slow moving average, even if price stops and goes sideways for a while and bases, that fast moving average eventually is going to start coming back up and eventually cross over, and then that's the confirmation that you're looking for. And so I think a lot of people think like, oh, how can these things start diverging and actually go positive if price is just going sideways? Well, it's how the moving averages start coming back and reverting to the mean.
Exactly, and so mean reversion is something that I've been playing with actually for the last couple of years using that momentum indicator. But what you also mentioned is really related to slope, which is physics, right?
Well, I'll get another topic on that because you just reminded me of something.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's just, so I come from an engineering background. My dad was an electrical engineer through study. I'm a mechanical engineer. That's just how my brain works. And so when I looked at the stock market and I started really kind of learn it and just pick it apart on my own, I realized that there was kind of a physical universe inside of our screens. I talk about terms about bouncing and resistance and mush and hardness and a lot of these things.
Laws of attraction.
Momentum. And you can see where there are kind of arcs, and you can see where something just starts to slow down, and then gravity kind of comes back.
Right? It's things in motion stay in motion kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I try to explain that to a lot of subscribers and traders too, that there's some physics in here. And it sounds like whatever you're going to say with the physics is that some of your computer modeling goes with that too.
Absolutely. And, again, I always have to say that everything that I talk about now with great words and articulation really starts from what I learned on the floor. Because in terms of momentum, we didn't chart it, but you could feel it, you could see it, you could smell it, you could taste it.
I mean, you see all the movies back in the day with all that stuff, and you could just, the cacophony out there.
Oh my God, and especially for me, as a woman, not that I'm saying the gender made the difference, it was the physical size and the amplification of my voice, clearly not as loud, that was the factor. So I really had to step back when things got insane. Like I could feel the momentum shift. Mm-hmm. You could see something in the eyes of the traders, especially those who had a big order desk. You could see that they had something hot in their hand before they even made a word. And that was how I started to understand the aspects of momentum. What's great is what you're doing and what we're doing is now being able to actually chart that momentum because we don't have that ability to be on the floor anymore.
Yeah. Now, speaking of some of those experiences, and I've seen programs where, since the floor trading has largely gone away, a lot of those floor traders who used to be very successful, made a lot of money, and then they had to go to basically internet trading, they couldn't pick up on those cues. It's now silence, and they have to use their screens or their computers, their indicators to figure out when there's a lot of activity on something. How do you feel about that? Like where have people gone, and how do you then figure out when something really is active and has that buzz about it?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is obviously you can track volume. So, we may look for, on the floor where you were right there where you could see it. Upstairs where you're looking at charts, it's more about range and expansion and volume at the same time, kind of clues you into that something's happening in that space. Whether or not it's just a day trade or a longer term trade always remains to be seen. Of course, then we're looking at trends and stuff like that. But I still, when I'm watching the screens and I see something going, I go back. I spent 14 years there. So for years and years and years, I couldn't turn off the noise. I'd go to sleep at night and I would hear 2 minute 30, and but that part of insane chatter in my brain has gone away, but there's a level of chatter that brings me right back just from watching ticks. And there are some people who were floor traders who still point and figure chart, which is how I started, because in essence, that's how you can track what's happening in terms of the momentum and hearing the noise. But it was it's unfortunate and also obviously inevitable that it would go away.
Well, I think it kind of just changed gears a little bit. And now that you think about ease at which somebody can get into the market. We have all these amazing tools. I mean, think about the progress that even StockCharts has had. StockCharts.com is now ubiquitous, and they have so much now content like what we're doing and the shows we put on, the indicators that we have. I mean, in one sense, it could be a little overwhelming. There's so many different options, but really, if you start to find your niche, or you find people that you resonate with as far as other traders or mentors, then you can kind of follow their path. And then we have all the tools we need. We have high-speed internet. We have all the data that we can put out. We can put out videos. I mean, the ability to educate yourself and dive into this is unlike it's ever been before.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things, because I do a lot of work on network media, and I do a lot of work with companies like StockCharts, so I get both. And what's interesting is that when you're on network media, it's really the producer that's booking, not necessarily based on what your expertise is and how good you are at it, but more, can you fulfill the content or whatever the news is of the day, or you have a good publicist who has
they got ratings
you.
They got to work on, right?
Right, or there's a book that came out, right, exactly. It's all about the ratings, and bad news, as we know, sells. And I think we're starting to see, the divide that we're starting to see with companies like StockCharts, is that we've been vetted by the actual people who run the company. And so for people who are looking to learn from not people who just talk the talk, but also walk the walk, so to speak, these type of educational content providers that have people that are actually also traders, because a lot of these people go on the media can tell you all day long, oh, buy this, and they never make a trade in their life.
Yeah, we're right down there in it doing our own
We're,
trades.
we're in the pits.
Yep.
It just looks a little different now.